Onesimus, former enslaved black person, an expert in African medicine. Onesimus was a slave in Boston, Massachusetts during the early 1700s. He had grown up in Africa, a member of the Garamantis tribe, but was enslaved and brought to America. In 1706, the parishioners of a Bostonian church gave Onesimus to their pastor Cotton Mather. A leading theologian at the time, Mather was also an avid natural scientist. He frequently wrote letters about his observations to the leading scientific journal of the time, the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society of London. One of the dreaded diseases of that time was smallpox. The practice of inoculation was being experimented with as a way to make people immune to the disease. People were inoculated at that time by scratching their arms until they just started to bleed. A small amount of pus from an infected person would be rubbed into this incision. The hope was that the resulting infection would produce only a very mild case of the disease. However, there was no guarantee that that would occur. Although the details of what was happening were not known then, today it is known that inoculation places a small amount of infectious material into people and gives their immune system time to build up resistance to the disease. Methods are now available to ensure that today's inoculating fluids cannot cause the full-blown disease. Mather was reading one of his own letters in the July 12, 1716 issue of Philosophical Transactions. Immediately following his letter was an article by Emmanuel Timonius describing the practice of inoculation in Turkey. Mather was struck by how closely this practice resembled what Onesimus had told him about what was done to him in Africa. Mather's description of what Onesimus had told him is reprinted in the Yale Journal of Biology and Medicine from a letter he wrote to the Royal Society. Inquiring of my Negro man Onesimus, who was a pretty intelligent fellow, whether he ever had the smallpox, he answered both yes and no, and then told me that he had undergone an operation which had given him something of the smallpox and would forever preserve him from it, adding that it was often used among the Garamantes, and whoever had the courage to use it was forever free from the fear of the contagion. He described the operation to me, and showed me in his arm the scar which it had left upon him, and his description of it made it the same that afterwards I found related unto you by your Timonius. Unquote. Mather urged further investigation into inoculation, but nothing occurred for 5 years. In April of 1721, the HMS Seahorse arrived in Boston Harbor from the West Indies. Unknowingly, it was carrying smallpox, which resulted in an epidemic in Boston and surrounding areas. Within a year, half of Boston's 12,000 inhabitants got the disease, and 900 died. Mather vigorously pleaded for widespread inoculation, but he was not a physician, and the medical community of the time was not convinced the procedure was safe. Spurred on by ravages of the epidemic around him, and remembering what Onesimus had told him, Mather wrote to Zabdiel Boylston, a self-educated country doctor who did not have a medical degree. On June 26, 1721, Boylston inoculated his 6-year-old son, Thomas, and 2 of his slaves. All 3 were successfully inoculated. The controversy became more heated, but Boylston continued to safely inoculate more and more people. The epidemic gradually abated, and Boylston kept careful record of what happened to the people he inoculated. Of the 286 people he inoculated, 2.1% died, compared to the 14.9% of those who acquired smallpox naturally. Boylston reported his findings to the Royal Society, and the medical community became convinced of the value of inoculation. It gradually spread throughout the world, and Boylston was honored by being made a Fellow of the Royal Society on July 7th, 1726, when Sir Isaac Newton was president. Though the accurate recounting of the procedure carried out on him, Onesimus helped through the accurate recounting of the procedure carried out on him, Onesimus helped bring knowledge of inoculation to the Western world. This would remain the primary way of protecting people from the ravages of smallpox until the introduction of Jennerian cowpox vaccination in 1798. Citations are in the description.